I was searching for a car to buy for my son's 18th birthday. I'd been checking all the usual sites, cars.com, eBay Motors, but everything was overpriced, just like I expected. Craigslist felt like the only place where I might find a real deal. About a week into the search, I came across a 2003 Toyota Camry. It had only 67,000 miles on it, no accidents, no visible damage, and was listed as being in good condition, all for just $3,500. That seemed like a steal for a car known to be that reliable, especially with such low mileage. The seller lived just 10 miles away, which made it a pretty easy drive. I called the Kyo number listed to set up a time to check it out. The man who answered sounded completely normal. He told me there were absolutely no issues with the vehicle and introduced himself as Bob. I went ahead and brought $3,500 in cash with me, though I was definitely planning to negotiate the price down if I could. I showed up to Bob's property about 15 minutes early. It was a small house on a decent-sized lot, mostly isolated with the nearest neighbors a good distance away. The garage was open, so I walked over to see if he might be inside. But aside from an unusual number of car parts stacked around, it was empty. Strangely, the Camry wasn't there. In fact, the only vehicle on the property was an old pickup truck. I walked up to the front door to double-check the house number. It was the correct address. The doorbell was broken, so I knocked. I kept knocking for a full 5 minutes before deciding to give Bob a call. That's when I heard a cell phone ringing from inside the house. Now I knew for sure I had the right place. But if Bob was home, why wasn't he answering? It didn't make any sense. Curious and a bit uneasy, I moved over to one of the windows to take a look inside. It was dark in there, hard to see much. I spotted an old, outdated dining room set, the kind you'd find in your grandmother's house. But just across from that, I noticed someone standing by the back door, facing outward, completely still. I assumed that must be Bob. I knocked on the window to get his attention, but he didn't move at all. There was no fence or gate blocking. The backyard, just open space stretching around the house. Since we weren't exactly in a crowded neighborhood, I figured it wouldn't be a big deal to walk around and speak to him from the back. I didn't understand how he hadn't heard me. I'd been knocking and calling, and now I was practically right behind him. When I reached the back door, my stomach dropped. The figure I had seen wasn't a person. It was a human taxidermy, a lifeless body, posed to stare blankly out that door. Didn't hesitate for a second. I turned around and ran full speed straight to my car. I jumped in and slammed the door, breathless and panicked. As I looked up one last time before tearing off, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The blinds on the window I'd peeked through earlier, now they were shut. But two of the slats were bent open. Someone was standing there watching me. Needless to say, I had the gas pedal floored the entire way home. I still can't make sense of what happened. All those car parts in the garage, the fact there was no Camry, the taxidermied human being. None of it adds up. But what I can't stop thinking about is this. Whoever that man was, he was never planning on selling me a car, and I have a horrible feeling that I came this close to becoming another lifeless figure forever posed in that house staring out the back door. I'm a 22-year-old woman, and about a month ago I was browsing Craigslist to find a couch for my new apartment. I came across a listing that looked like a really good deal. The pictures showed a couch that appeared to be in excellent condition. The seller only wanted to be contacted by email, and his address was alexantikiskisix@hotmail.com. That email gave me a weird feeling, but I decided to message him with an offer anyway. He replied within 5 minutes, accepted the offer, and asked for my home address. That immediately made me uncomfortable. I didn't want a complete stranger coming to my place. I suggested I could come to his house to pick it up instead, but he kept insisting that he would bring it to me. He just wouldn't let it go. Eventually, I stopped replying. The next day, he emailed me again, this time with his address. I wasn't sure if I should go, but the price was unbelievably low and it felt like a deal I didn't want to miss. His place wasn't far, so I got in my van and drove to the address he gave me. As I pulled up, I noticed his house was noticeably smaller than all the others on the street. I rang the bell and a middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap answered. He flashed this big grin and invited me inside. Right away, I felt on edge. He led me to the living room where I saw the couch. and immediately I knew something was off. There were scuff marks and little tears everywhere. It looked nothing like the pictures. I pointed this out and he just smiled and said he'd drop the price. I told him I wasn't interested. That's when things got seriously creepy. As I turned to leave, he put his hand on my shoulder and offered to give me the couch for free if I was willing to give something in return. I gasped in disgust, pulled away, and walked straight out without saying a word. I didn't even glance back. I jumped in my car and drove off as fast as I could. But it didn't end there. That same night, I was in bed watching TV when I thought I heard heavy footsteps coming up my porch stairs. I muted the sound and I could clearly hear someone messing with my front doorknob. I leapt out of bed and crept to the door to peek through the peephole. But by then, whoever it was had already vanished. Then I heard the backyard gate creak, open, and shut. That's when I grabbed my phone and called 911. A minute later, I heard someone jiggling the handle of the back door. I yelled out that the police were on their way, and after a few tense seconds, I heard the gate open and close. Once more. They were gone. That was a month ago. Nothing else has happened since, but I still can't sleep properly. I'm almost certain it was the guy from the couch ad. He must have followed me home. There's no way that was just a coincidence. I haven't been back on Craigslist since, and now I'm looking for a whole new apartment. About a year ago, I was trying to buy an iPhone 5. I came across a listing on Craigslist where a guy was selling his for $200. He said it was in mint condition and that he was only selling it because he wanted to upgrade to the iPhone 5C. Now, I didn't know much about how to properly test a phone to make sure everything worked, so I brought my younger brother along. He knew way more about phones than I did. We agreed to meet halfway at a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. It was about 10 o'clock at night. When we pulled in, two large, intimidating guys stepped out of a black Honda Civic and walked over to us. One of them pulled the phone out and handed it to me. It looked flawless. Not a single scratch. My brother took my SIM card, popped it into the phone, tested it a bit, and gave me the nod that everything checked out. Then the guy suddenly said he wanted $250 instead of the original $200 he listed. I told him I only brought $200, even though I actually had $250 on me. I just didn't want to pay more than his asking price. It felt like a last-minute hustle to avoid negotiating. He didn't look thrilled, but he took the $200. The two of them got back into their car, and we got into mine. I stayed in the parking lot for a few minutes, testing the phone by calling my girlfriend and messing around with some features. That's when my brother mentioned something strange. The two guys still hadn't driven off. They were just sitting there in their car. I didn't think much of it at the time. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. Almost immediately, my brother pointed out that the black Civic had started up the moment we did. That got my attention. I turned onto the turnpike and started heading home. But at every stoplight, every single turn, I kept seeing their car behind us. It was starting to feel deliberate. My brother suggested I pull over and let them pass, but no way was I going to stop. Something was off. These guys weren't trying to get our attention. They didn't honk, didn't signal. They were tailing us, quietly, closely. At that point, I started driving faster, trying to lose them. I even took random turns, but they stayed right on my tail. I knew if they wanted to talk or needed something, they would have done something, anything to communicate. But they didn't. It felt like they were waiting for a moment, and not a good one. Eventually, I reached an intersection just as the light turned red. I took a risk and floored it, blowing right through it before cross-traffic could start moving. My brother screamed at me, calling me insane, but it worked. When I looked back, the Civic hadn't followed. We had finally lost them. We didn't go home immediately. I took the long way just in case. My heart was pounding the whole time, but at least we were safe, and I had a working iPhone for only $200. Later that night, everyone else in the house had gone to bed. I was up, still setting up the new phone, when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Two car doors slamming shut outside. I looked out my window. The black Honda Civic was parked across the street. My stomach dropped. I could only assume those two guys were already on their way to our front door. I rushed to wake up my dad and told him everything as quickly as I could. He didn't even hesitate. He grabbed a baseball bat and crouched behind the front door. Then came a loud knock. My dad shouted for them to leave. One of the guys on the other side yelled back, saying he had a gun and would shoot the lock off if the door didn't open. My dad whispered for me to call Joe, our neighbor 2 houses down. Joe's a cop. I called Joe and told him everything. He said, "Stay low, I'm coming right now." And then I heard it. A muffled gunshot, silent but unmistakable. I peeked around the corner and saw a bullet hole in the front door. It had missed my dad's head by inches. He bolted away from the door. Then we heard Joe outside yelling commands. "Drop your weapons," he shouted. My dad ran out to help. When the guys lowered their guns, Joe moved in and cuffed both of them on the spot. To this day, that was the scariest experience I've ever had. But in some weird way, it was also the most alive I've ever felt.